also the FTC, the Department of Justice, and states attorneys general. So, we are, I don't want to say obligated, but we are watched and we are accountable, to many different groups to make high quality, safe products. And so as part of that, we're really committed to identity and quality testing. And so identity testing is the one test that the FDA requires be conducted universally. So here's calendula, that you can see in that picture. We grew that ourselves with seeds that we saved ourselves, and we know what that is. However, we still need to jump through the hoops of confirming that it meets our different identity specifications. So it's a pretty rigorous process. If we receive 5 loads of calendula in one day, we go through the process 5 times to confirm what that identity is. Because we accept herbs in such a whole form, it makes this much easier. So we look at physical characteristics, that's the macroscopic analysis. So we do taste of the raw herb material. We look at what it smells like. What does it feel like? Is there hair on the leaves? Is it soft? Is it dense? We even with our reishi, it makes a certain sound whenever we cut it with the snips. And so, or sounds of breaking stems, so we kind of have a checklist that we go through that says, yes, this is absolutely calendula. We are 10,000% sure before we put it into anything else. So I think that's kind of fun. And that would be a lot more difficult with a powder. It's easier to adulterate powders because you can't really tell what's in there and you need to use a microscope to figure it out, which definitely requires more expertise. We are also looking at chemical composition. So that's HPTLC, high performance thin layer chromatography. I think I have an example of that. Yeah, so that's here on the right is what that looks like. And so the concept with HPTLC is that every plant has a fingerprint. And so we want to check to make sure that fingerprint is consistent from batch to batch. And sometimes we are testing, we're always testing for the presence of compounds that we want to see in there. Sometimes we are testing for compounds we don't want to see in there. So some good examples are, historically adulterated plants. So skullcap, for example, there have been concerns about germander adulteration. We grow our own skullcap. We do not grow germander, but we still test against that negative standard. Another good example that we also grow ourselves is plantain. This didn't impact Herb Pharm, but there was at one point adulteration of a plantain with foxglove, which is obviously a problem. And so even though that didn't impact us, and even though we grow our own plantain, we test it against foxglove standards to be extra sure, basically, that there's nothing in there that could be problematic. So we're growing plants, they're natural products. We want to see consistency, but we also have to acknowledge that there's going to be some variability. So, it's up to us to say, this is good, or like, whoa, what happened? I always expect to see more. We have wildfires here, and that's something a weather event that we really have to deal with on almost an annual basis. And I've been really surprised to see it doesn't affect the chemistry, of the extracts or the plants very much, which I just continue to be shocked by.
On that note, Betsy had a question. Do you notice the qualities in the plants changing from year to year due to other weather or climate conditions?
Yes. Yes, we do see things happening. Flooding, is a really good example. If an area gets a ton of rain, we'll see weaker chemical profiles, and so it's like the plant has absorbed so much more water. I think that it has diluted its chemistry, when it gets to us. So that is a definite reality, that we have to deal with. And it's a judgment call too, of like, well, how much is too much, and sometimes it's just so far out of bounds that's like, this doesn't even look like, the herb profile, but a lot of times it's weather related. and it's not the wildcrafter's fault. And, it's challenging for them. They just go out there and pick the plant. They don't know the chemistry, until after they send it to us. So we do the best we can to honor those relationships. But absolutely, the weather has a huge impact, especially the water factor. We see more, I guess, to elaborate more on the fires, what we see happen as far as the plants change is they quicken their flowering cycle. So it's fast. They flower, they make seeds, they go dormant much faster in response to fires.
And another question piggybacking on that, how about insect infestation? How does that affect chemical profile, or have you seen anything like that?
We're really lucky. We don't have a lot of insect issues on our farm. And I think that's just because of how we farm. We don't have a lot of monocrops. We don't have any monocrops, actually. I shouldn't say a lot. We don't have any. And our farm is 85 acres. We farm less than 20 of them. And the fields are very small, and which means that we have a lot of edges. We have a lot of biodiversity, because we don't have huge fields of all of the same thing. And so I can mention alfalfa. Alfalfa is a plant that's really vulnerable to insects. So it's not so much that we see the chemistry change, it's that they demolish the plants, and so there's nothing for us to harvest. So I think we're very lucky to generally just be in balance. Even those alfalfa bugs, I think they're alfalfa weevils or beetles or something like that. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering them. Some other insect comes in and takes care of them. The alfalfa just goes through a really hard time, and then it bounces back later in the season and it looks great. So it's kind of a weird thing where we just have to not react and let the farm take care of it, and kind of have faith that it's going to do that for itself. I will say, when I kind of broaden what I'm thinking outside of the farm, St. John's wort is an interesting one that we're seeing being affected by what's happening here is that cattle ranchers don't want their cows to eat St. John's wort. So in response, the state and certain counties in particular are releasing these beetles that love to eat St. John's wort. And so there's actually 3 species of insect now that they've released in certain counties, and they demolish the plants. It's insane. And so, the St. John's wort patches that, our St. John's wort guy's been going out there for 25 years, and patches that he's been going to for years and years are demolished, and they come back. But it's really interesting unintended consequence that the Department of Agriculture probably didn't think about. Most of them, they're not thinking about an herb company, that's going to use it. But it's something that we're being conscious about of our planning, for the future, that our wildcrafters this year, they just kind of waved a flag like, hey, a lot of my picking sites don't look good, and I'm a little concerned. So it's certainly something for us to be aware of, and that I think will be probably a bigger issue as the climate continues to change.
And then there was one that kind of jumped back a little bit, maybe a couple slides back. Curious about what kind of tincture press is used. So this was, you were talking about the macerating process.
If any of you know Richo Check at Horizon Herbs, he sells a hydraulic press, and he worked for Herb Pharm. And those are basically what he is selling, is a really small version of what Herb Pharm uses. So we use these large hydraulic presses, basically, that are incredibly strong. They move pretty slowly, but they're incredible because your yield is very high. If you were going to run a medicine making company, I highly recommend buying a tincture press. That's a really worthy investment because you get such a higher yield, whenever you're doing that. Than like, I use a potato ricer and cheesecloth at home, whenever I'm making my own extracts, and there's a lot of liquid, I'm sure, that's left in my herb material. So the press is really excellent. It almost looks like a jack, basically that gets jacked up to press the liquid out. And it's pretty simple, actually, but again, a really worthy investment. And geez, let's see. Gosh, I just blasted through this. I'm sorry I talked so quickly. I want to think about something else. I wanted to tell you all, sorry, let me go back to testing. I apologize. Because there are other things that we do that I should discuss. Microbiological testing. Microbiological testing is really important, and we conduct microbiological testing on all of our raw materials as well as all of our finished products. And so what we're testing for is called TVC, that's total viable count. That's basically how many living organisms are on this thing. And if it's over a certain amount, there's a greater likelihood that there's an undesirable organism, that's in there. So we set limits there, for how much or how high our TVC can be. We also test for yeast and mold. That's really critical. We test for E. coli, that also really critical, and something that you don't necessarily want to see, especially particular species of E. coli can be more damaging. And then salmonella, that's a no-go. There is no good species of salmonella, so it's really critical to us that we test for that. We do also conduct, not in-house, we send these out, but we conduct a lot of pesticide, herbicide testing. And we do have a risk-based assessment program. So, we're not testing for pesticides on herbs from organic farms because we're trusting that organic certification process. We are looking at areas where, wow, this country is known for its pesticide use or its herbicide use. And even though we're purchasing this from a certified organic farm, we can't overlook the history of use of herbicides and pesticides in this country. So we take a closer look at a lot of those materials and test them additionally just to make sure they're okay. We do the same thing for heavy metals. So that's also kind of a risk-based assessment there. If it's a plant that we know is a dynamic accumulator, we do additional testing for that. If it comes from an area that's known for, high metal concentrations in the soil, we do more testing for that. So a testing program is really expensive. It's something to think about. It ultimately increases the price of the goods, so we try to be really cautious, but also judicious so that we continue to provide a competitively priced extract. And we recently got into hemp. That's kind of our newest product line that we released. And wow, that is a whole other level of testing that is required for hemp. And one of my bosses, he's been in the industry for almost as long as the company's been in existence. And he says this hemp thing is just one of the most mind-boggling, difficult things that he's seen. And it's been a real departure for us from how we make our extracts. We consider ourselves to be really traditional medicine makers. And so, we're not trying to extract one constituent. We are looking for a broad spectrum of phytochemicals that best represents the plant or plant part that we're looking at. And so it's been a real retraining of how we think to look at cannabinoids, basically, and not even think about, or people don't care, about the other components that are in the hemp plant. So it's been kind of fascinating and a readjustment for us. We don't make a lot of standardized extracts. And a standardized extract is really when you're measuring basically a single compound that is in there, and you're putting that number on your label, and you're guaranteeing that that's what people are going to consume whenever they take your extract. So sometimes that means people can manipulate that or not. It doesn't always mean it's manipulated if it's standardized, but it can be. So they may add curcumin, to get to the right level of curcumin or, something like that. So hemp has been an interesting challenge.
All right,
Okay.
Alexis, Luann
Yes.
wants to know, how did you come up with your tincture blends, and how do you determine the percentage used of the different herbs?
Great questions. How do we come up with our tincture blends? Herbalists formulate them, basically, is the way that it works. We do have a few things that Ed took from old eclectic recipes. So like neutralizing cordial, a lot of herb companies have a version of the neutralizing cordial, because that is something that has been around a long time. Claus's liniment, Jethro Claus's liniment. That is something that we call, we've changed the joint and muscle rub. That's the newer name for it. So that's kind of a variation on that. So there's some history, I guess, basically that is factored into that. Now that it's later, now, and we're using more herbs and more different herbs, we have over 300 different products at this point. And so now that I'm working on formulation, my personal approach is, we're generally formulating to support a specific body system. We can't talk about using our products for specific diseases or diagnoses. So that's kind of like we're formulating for immune support, or we're formulating for stress, or things like that. And so I will often try to think of like, what is my primary herb or herbs going to be based on what the goal of this formula is? And then we look at secondary systems that might need support, so let's take adaptogens. For example, I love to combine them with nervines, because the nervous system always needs support too when a person is experiencing stress. So we come with our primary, then we kind of think about our secondary, and then we often will add a driver. And because we're kind of fans of the eclectic tradition, we often use prickly ash as our driver, which I find really interesting. So very cool herb that we get wildcrafted for us in the southeastern United States, that was traditionally used as a circulatory stimulant. So we use that one a lot. We use ginger, which also serves as a driver and circulatory stimulant, as well as a corrigant, and adds a little bit of flavor. And let's see, and then some things, we won't do a driver, we'll add something for a little bit of flavor to make it a little bit more pleasant for folks to take. I think that is the biggest challenge with liquid extracts is that folks have to taste them, which I think as herbalists, we know that, you don't want to take a bitter herb in the capsule to get the effects of a digestive bitter because you're never tasting it, and those effects start when you're salivating and when it's in your mouth. And so we believe that's true of all herbs, basically, and that the taste is just part of the effect and the experience. And can you repeat to me, Carolyn, the second part of the question again?
How do you determine the percentage used of the different herbs?
We play. We make a lot of different versions, a lot of different prototypes, basically, and see what we like the best. We try not to let flavor overrule effectiveness, or efficacy. So, we don't mind it tasting bad if we feel like it's going to work. But we generally make several different versions of something. And then we have a product approval team. And so those folks, they're representatives from all over the company. So because we recognize, like, I'm probably going to care less that it tastes terrible than someone in another department will because I love herbs so much. So we want to be sure, that an herbal newbie, it would find this to be a welcoming product for them. And so multiple people try it. It's kind of a blind tasting process where they just have, we have option A, B, C, D, E. Tell us what you think about all of them. And then we kind of narrow it down from there and balance out the feedback that we get with what we think is going to make the best product. And then we kind of go from there. It's a lot of fun. That's my favorite part. I wish we released new products all the time. I think we'd be exhausted, but it's definitely one of the most rewarding aspects. Something cool, I'm sorry, I'll just continue for just a second. The cool thing we did pretty recently was sprays. And I feel like that was our attempt to, we called that a welcome mat product of like, come in, don't be afraid, of the liquids. We can make things that taste good, so that was an opportunity for David Bunting. He is the formulator who made those products. We used a little bit more glycerin, and we looked more at corrigants, we used rose petal glycerite, in one of them, like what tastes good and is still going to be effective. And we used cacao, and some other herbs that we really branched out to just kind of meet people where they're at and not challenge them so much with flavor.
All right, there's a comment from Jaiba. You're talking my language. I have tested hundreds of herbs for Salmonella E. coli. So back to the testing, you're some experienced people in the room.
Yes. Well, it's really critical. I mean, providing a safe product is the most important thing that we can do, and that is our responsibility, to our customers and to the industry. And so we take it super seriously. And we actually had just something wild happen where our salmonella testing machine went nuts and just started, giving false positives. And that's a really scary thing for a company to go through, because it's a shutdown. If it's real, it's a shutdown type situation and a sanitize everything type situation, which I guess feels less daunting now that we're living through COVID, and we've actually had to do that for other reasons. But it's something that we take so seriously. And I should have mentioned too, another thing that we look at is foreign materials. And so every bag of herb that we receive gets poured onto a table, basically, and we go through it and we rebarrel it. And that table has a magnet under it. And so it catches, sometimes it's like there's a stray irrigation thing, or something that gets in there. And so there's an allowable limit, a very small allowable limit of foreign material. And we really have like just a few things over the past 8 years or something in this little Ziploc bag, in the place where we do that stuff. So it's not that frequent that it happens, but it is really critical for us to look through everything. And actually, the wrong plant part is considered foreign material. So if we ordered something leaf and flower and received 50% stem, we'd have to reject that. That's considered a violation of foreign material, and so we can't accept it. So really important that we are really specific with the people who are supplying our herbs about what we need, and that they actually send us the right stuff. So we take it super seriously. And again, so does the FDA. So it's really great to actually work with them, and try to do right by the industry so that we're more trusted. So gosh, I could talk about this forever. Where we're at now in the industry, and because I want to be honest, it is not easy, to run a dietary supplement company. I'm not even running it; I just work here. It is challenging, and I could see how it would be hard, to start something now. And they're making it harder. There are more regulations all the time, and so it's something to be really conscious of. I encourage folks, if you're familiar with them or not, to look at APA, the American Herbal Products Association. They're a trade organization that represents the dietary supplement industry, to the government, basically, and to other trade organizations. And so they've got a lot of resources. APA.org is their website. They've got resources for small businesses, webinars that you can watch about being compliant with the FDA, and just good best practices, following GMPs, what to expect for an inspection, different things like that really help us all stay informed and accountable. So they're a great resource if you're a person who's interested in making your own, products of any kind. They've got worksheets that you can use as examples to create some kind of, tracking system, because that's what it really boils down to. If you're going to do this yourself, is keeping excellent records. That would be my greatest advice that I could probably give you. Okay, so challenges. I think if you talk to anybody in the industry, the top challenge they're probably going to list is climate change. And, no matter what you think about it, we can see a change in harvest seasons. We can see plant populations disappearing. Joseph Brinkman recently wrote a just sad but incredible article about rhodiola. It is dire. Wildcrafted rhodiola, very sad, very over harvested, and then disappearing, as the climate continues to shift. And so it's a real reality that we're all going to have to figure out how to deal with. And it's kind of incumbent on all of us to figure out like what is right, how much is too much to take, what is sustainable, how do we stay in right relationship, when, especially as a growing business, as people's needs, are greater and greater, how do we stay, again, in right relationship and not take more than our share, while we're providing for other people. So that's something that remains at top of mind for me all the time, and I think that's one reason why we're so committed to our farming practices and to upholding those really positive, long-standing, wildcrafting relationships that we have. It's a sad reality of where we live. Our recycling services are extremely limited, because we're in this rural area. And so, it's just looking at like the extra mile, that you have to go to do the right thing. And then also, what does it mean, as the climate changes? Is it going to be harder to import herbs? Probably. We get a lot of herbs from India, and other areas that are experiencing climate disasters and, humanitarian crises. And so, we talked about formulation earlier. I know that I personally, as I grow as a formulator here, I'm also thinking, what's local? Like, let's not bring in more. I'm concerned, about how much weight we put on herbs from other countries, and how difficult that could be in the future for us to sustain that supply. So, um, some of the things that keep me up at night, that I worry about. And I want to encourage you to check out this article. It's online. It was written by an herbalist and wildcrafter, Scott Cluse. And he wrote this after he taught here for United Plant Savers Planting the Future conference. And it's an article, Wildcrafting in a Warming World Towards Regenerative Practices for Life in the Anthropocene. And, as a wildcrafter, he sees firsthand, how plant populations are being impacted as the climate is changing. And so, he has some perspective and advice on how to be in a good relationship. If I had to pick one herb that's like, this is what herbalism is about, it's about relationship. It's about relationship with plants and the earth and each other. And so really just feeling good, about where we are in that space. My gosh, I have to mention COVID, as an industry challenge. And I can say that for Herb Pharm, and I think for a lot of other companies, it demolished our stock of herbs and our stocks of extracts. And so it has, had a huge impact on supply chain. And part of it's great because that means more people are using herbs more. Awesome. That's great. I want people to have plants in their life more. However, can we sustain that level of growth? And then plants, it's not like we can just go to the mall and get more. Can't believe I said that. I haven't been to a mall in so long, but they grow, they're natural, they're seasonal. So once we're out of echinacea root, we can't get it again, until the next year. And so there's that seasonal aspect that's really challenging, that we have found difficult as well. And then again, bringing up international herbs, how difficult it has been to get them. The demand has been just incredibly high. And so, and we're talking demand for glass bottles, demand for dropper tops, demand for glycerin. It's all the ingredients, it's not just the plants. And what we're seeing now, which is really ironic, now that everyone is staying inside and wearing masks and washing their hands and social distancing, they're not buying immune extracts anymore. So we're also just seeing weird changes to our sales patterns that are really difficult for us to anticipate. What people are really into right now, which won't be a surprise to anybody, herbs for stress, herbs for sleep, herbs for anxiety, and herbs for cognition. So those are the things that people are really looking for right now. And it's really remarkable, that we just can't predict what people are going to want when, and how hard it has been on us. And it's just really, I don't want to say like exposed weaknesses or just kind of vulnerabilities. It has certainly made us aware though that like, wow, there are going to be some challenges. To me, it felt like COVID amplified some of the coming climate change, challenges that we are going to have. So yeah, I continue to be happy more people are using herbs and continue to wonder, can we sustain this growth? So I again feel thankful that we grow as many of the herbs that we use ourselves, which is just the best way to ensure the highest quality also. And then the hemp regulatory environment, I kind of touched on that earlier. That's really changed the dietary supplement industry in ways that nobody expected. What's weird on my end is seeing very little enforcement, coming from the FDA, but then also seeing really new players who are not involved. They're not involved with the dietary supplement industry who are now in it. So there's a very steep learning curve. A lot of vocabulary has changed that we've used, with the kind of advent and introduction of all of these hemp extracts. And, the reality is, hemp is one of the most studied plants, ever at this point. And it has there's a lot of information available. There are chemical standards available for that plant so that you can do a lot more testing. And what I'm seeing now is that people are thinking, well, why can't you do that for red clover? It's like, well, because people haven't invested billions and billions of dollars in the red clover market. It's not the new it herb, right now. So that's a challenge, I think, just kind of level setting with folks and trying to understand that for a lot of people, and this is a great thing, hemp is one of the first herbs that they've used, and it's kind of their introduction to plant medicine. But it also kind of creates an unusual level of expectation of other herb products that may not be realistic. Okay, and then I was trying to figure out how to say this. I said costly industry hoops and certifications. And so something else that I'm seeing that I find really interesting that I'm not sure how to deal with is that for the sake of safety, a lot of businesses, big businesses we're talking about, are really creating very stringent requirements for herbal products that they are selling. And so part of the challenge there is that a dietary supplement, like vitamin D is a dietary supplement, just like my bottle of anxiety soother here is a dietary supplement. But it's a lot easier to test for a single compound like vitamin D, than it is to test for all the different herbs that's in an herbal compound. So we're finding that the regulations are being created that might be more suitable for vitamins and minerals than plant-based products, especially non-standardized. And so, we kind of called them GMPs on steroids. And I can't believe I didn't mention GMPs earlier. Shame on me. So GMPs are good manufacturing practices. And so those are set forth by the FDA. And so that's really what we follow. They govern our process, our products, our facility, and all of our raw materials. So we're always striving to and required, to meet GMPs. And so that's kind of like those testing standards that I was talking about. Those are things like dressing properly in certain areas, sterilization of certain areas, hair nets, beard nets, covering my nose ring, different things like that, to again provide the safest, highest quality, most effective product that we can. So these new certifications are kind of like GMPs on steroids. Like they're very intensive and they're very costly. And, my concern for the industry is that those aren't going to be affordable for a smaller company. We're even looking at it and thinking, wow, this is really expensive, which translates into higher cost eventually for the customer. And so I've kind of played this out. I've gamed this out in my mind. And what I think will happen is another advent of the cottage herb industry, where that's fine. You don't want to sell your extracts in Whole Foods. No big deal. Sell it in a small herb store, sell it locally at a farmer's market, and so my hope is that that's kind of going to be the impact eventually, and that it'll end up promoting smaller herb businesses in the long run while keeping these bigger businesses accountable.
Betsy has a comment. It seems like there's great opportunity to educate folks who are herb curious about herbs that aren't over harvested or as sexy as hemp that are valuable assets as well. Kind of like seafood sections of some markets educate consumers about which fish isn't over harvested, etc. Think consumers like to know this stuff.
I agree. Kind of like alternatives to OSHA, is another one. Like that's another herb that we have focused on that we don't want to use as much of, but it's kind of glamorous. I wonder, to me, it feels almost American. I'm not sure if it is. We want the strongest herb often, and what I was taught is the best herb is the gentlest one that works, and so that's a difficult concept to convey to a customer, who may be doubtful, who is looking for effectiveness. Like they're naturally probably not going to want to choose the gentle herb, they're going to want to choose the one that they think is going to work the best to knock it out. And so, similar to hemp, like you were saying, Betsy, I think OSHA has a similar reputation. And so we're actually moving away from using that in our formulas. We're going to continue to offer it as a single extract, but it was in Rapid Immune Boost, which is one of our most popular products. And, we just looked at that and thought, if this is going to keep flying off the shelves, we're going to use more OSHA than we want to. And we don't want to have that kind of impact on these wild plant populations. So we reformulated Rapid Immune Boost and we replaced it with Elecampaign, and that comes from our farm. And that feels really good that we can leave this herb, take less of it from the wild and replace it with something that we're growing ourselves. And we're in the process of reformulating another product that we're taking the OSHA out of, and we're putting in Grandelia instead, again, from our farm. And so in many ways, I think those are steps in the right direction. And I agree, hemp is a great gateway herb, for a lot of people who are just learning about herbs. So it is pretty cool.
And Betsy responded, bringing up the example of golden seal also, which you mentioned earlier. People who go straight to it and use heavy doses because it's what they know and it's, that's strong, when there are other options that aren't over harvested.
Completely agree. Yes, golden seal, like, oh gosh, what are people using it for? Why are they using so much? I actually found it. It's in my stepdaughter's face wash from Burt's Bees. I was looking at the label and was like, why is there golden seal in this face wash? Why are we using a plant that is so vulnerable? And, I can't tell from the label if it's cultivated or wildcrafted, and so yes, I agree with you. It's really interesting, the herbs that get the attention and the glamour. It's not the red clovers, or the really humble things. And so to me, it's important that we continue to offer those, not just the glamorous herbs. And in my interactions with customers, those are the things that I'm going to tell them about. That's kind of how I lead people. And, again, I can't say use this herb for this disease, but, I can kind of steer them towards maybe something less common, that they are, or less common in the research, more common as far as plant populations go. We're actually involved in a really cool golden seal project that we're pretty excited about, that I kind of think is one of the futures of those at-risk Appalachian herbs. It's a long-term growing project. So, that's part of the challenge for those farmers with a lot of these forest medicinals, is that they have to invest 4 to 7 years, of their lives to grow these things before they can harvest them. And that's a big risk for a farmer. And that's a big financial investment. It's an investment of time, money, space, the whole 9 yards. And so what we're starting to look into and have started with Golden Seal is a partnership with a grower. So we bought rootstock. He is it's kind of mimicking forest grown. So he's growing it there in Appalachia for us. We actually dug up a row of the golden seal that we are growing here under those poplar trees and sent it to him for him to plant. And we're basically going to keep having him replant every year and supporting him financially. As he does that, we're buying that root material and guaranteeing, hey, in 5 years, we're going to buy this from you. And we are invested in this financially together. So it's not just a loss to him. If something happens, like this is a partnership, we're going to shoulder that burden with you and we're going to support you, even if something goes wrong. And that's one of the reasons, having spoken with some ginseng growers, which actually y'all can probably tell me more about this, but what they were explaining to me is they often have a lot of fungal issues around the second or third year. And so they may have started out as certified organic and they end up having to spray them to save the crop, and so at which point they're not organic anymore. And so just some really interesting challenges, but I feel really heartened by organizations like ASD, Appalachian Sustainable Development, again, United Plant Savers with their Forest Grown Verified program, to shift the conversation into partnership and these long-term relationships, which is ultimately better for the farmer and also better for the plants.
We have a comment from Jane Stevens thanking you for offering all of your info. Fantastic. Jane owns and runs an herb farm in our area, about 2 hours southeast of the cities in Wisconsin. 4 Elements.
Jane, I need to order some of, is it your violet burdock cream? I love your farm and your products, Jane. So I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much. That is awesome to hear. And I guess while we're talking, I want to talk about wildcrafters too. That's a dying practice. And so that's something for us to be aware of. And not only are plant populations at risk, the population of wildcrafters is at risk. It's not necessarily a lucrative business. It is not an easy business. And it's kind of one of those things where it's kind of like people who go out and collect mushrooms, they won't tell you where their mushroom spot is, so I think wildcrafters are very tight-lipped and don't share a lot about where they get their plants. They often go out, the ones we work with at least, go out by themselves. And so, one person we've been working with for 25 years, he's getting ready to retire, and we're wondering, well, who are you going to pass your business along to? Because he doesn't have children. We do have another wildcrafter who's passing it on to his son, but that's a real threat to wildcrafting is not only are there not a lot of people to do it, they're not well trained, and so they don't know, don't take, do we take the older plants or the younger plants? Has this plant dropped seed yet? Is it the right time to get it? There's a lack of training around what is appropriate and how much is too much to take and how often to revisit a site. And so I'm really encouraged by those programs like the Forest Grown Verified and the Appalachian Sustainable Development that are training people. This is how you do it right. They're also providing processing centers so that people have a place to come in. They can clean off the herb. They have drying racks. They have a tracking system. And so they're trying to make it as easy as possible on the wildcrafter to do a good job, and to be accountable and to kind of keep this relationship alive. Some plants really thrive on being wildcrafted, and St. John's wort is one of those. It just comes back, and so we do have to be really conscious about this species and being respectful, of the land and of other cultures, that plant is important too. But yeah, the more wildcrafters that we have that are responsible and ethical, the better it is for our industry, for sure. And let's see. That was all I had. I'm finished early, so let me know if y'all have any other questions. I'm sorry I was so quick.
Not so far.
Okay.
Do you want to flip back? I mean, you don't have to go through everything at the beginning, but I didn't hit record until you were like a half an hour in. So for people who will be watching this not live, maybe just like,
there's me.
Did you go
sure.
through your background? I don't think
I did at the beginning.
Okay, you did.
There's me before the bangs, pre-COVID, back when
I didn't see the slides though. That's
the slides. Yeah, so that's me in the California poppy, and just kind of giving you a better sense of who I am. Gosh, I don't know what else to say. Should I give my intro again? So trained in herbalism at Bastyr. Robin D. Pasquale was one of my teachers, who she lived in the Midwest, kind of there in that area for a while. And I had a lot of incredible teachers. And so that's where most of my training came from. I will say it was expensive. And I think that there are less expensive ways to get a really high quality herbal education. I didn't know about the herbiculture internship. I was basically living in Austin, waitressing, unhappy, and Googled, and that was how I found Bastyr. And so I think there's a lot of other incredible non-university level herbal programs that can give you a fantastic education too. I am really grateful they taught me critical thinking skills. That is one of the greatest assets I think I learned there. And teaching about herbs is just one of my favorite things. And, I think I said this earlier. That's one of the big challenges for me in my job. And so I try to make it a game. How can I communicate with our customers within a regulatory framework that doesn't allow us to say everything that we want to? And, customers also find it really frustrating. I was on the phone with a guy today who was really mad at me because I couldn't tell him what to use the tea tree oil for, that he purchased. But each company has to kind of decide the level of risk that they want to take, as far as pushing the boundaries of the claims that we're able to make. We're technically supposed to speak in what is called a structure function claim. So that's where we can talk about how our products impact a structure or function of the body. So I can say immune support, not cold and flu, and so different things like that. So I have found that to be, it's a dance, and kind of one of the challenges. So I try to turn it into a game. And again, using language, kind of steer people towards the best herbs, and I can steer them towards non-wildcrafted, non-OSHA's, non-golden seal type things, and which is a great privilege of being able to interact with them the way that I can. Oh, and then,
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
We had some questions come in, but what were you going to say there?
I was just going to say this is such a cute picture. So go ahead with the questions.
And then that was Ed and Sarah. Ed Smith and Sara
Ed
Katz,
Smith
right?
and Sara Katz.
Founders of
We
HerbPharm.
actually, I'm in Ed's old office right now. These are some of his books behind me. And we have these wooden cases downstairs from when they used to, carry their extracts around. So it really impresses me what they were able to do without the technology that we have now, with all their labels. And they make a great team, so I think Ed is kind of like the dreamer idea guy, and Sarah's very practical, and so they have a great balance of skills as far as just creating a whole business partnership.
Okay, so a question came in from Alexis. What was that place that keeps up with regulation? The one you recommended to keep up with if you're trying to create a business?
It's APA, the American Herbal Products Association. So AHPA.org. They also, I'll do a plug for them that they're not paying me for. They have an incredible safety resource that we like to use. It's the Botanical Safety Handbook, and they have it available online. I think it's $99 for an annual subscription. And so that can be cost prohibitive from some folks, but I have found that to be one of the most comprehensive herbal safety resources that's out there. They update it pretty consistently with new clinical trials, adverse event reports, different things like that. They're a great place to look for information on the safety of an herb in pregnancy and nursing. They really took into account a lot of practitioners' perspectives, so a lot of herbalists and naturopaths were able to contribute actual, clinical perspective in addition to what you can see in this study.
Okay, and I put that in the chat a little bit earlier, ahpa.org, if anyone's looking for it spelled out. Betsy says, thank you so much for sharing, Alexis. Really good info and inspirational. Luann, and she said, we may have missed this, but I don't think this was brought up. Luann asked, do you tend to use dry or fresh herb material? What differences do you find in your product when using fresh versus dry?
So, I guess if we look at the number of ingredients that we use, The majority are going to be dried because we have to get a lot of things from other areas of the world, or other areas of the country dried. What we're able to do, those extracts tend to look stronger, so we can double macerate them if we need to increase their concentration. So that's something we tend to see, like fresh herb material has more water in it. It has water in it, and so we were actually just debating today. Right now, we're making an echinacea, our alcohol-free extract with fresh echinacea root, and we're debating, well, what if we did dried? Like we could, potentially make a more concentrated extract if we do that. And so it really depends on the herb. It's on a case by case basis. And then it depends on the plant part, that we're using too. So in the case of echinacea, the leaf and flower are fresh. The root is fresh. The seed is not, it is dried. And so that's just an example of the variety you can find with one plant. I think, a lot of the plants that we use fresh, we try to source as locally to us as possible. So things that can grow well in our environment here, or our friends at Oshala, or, other places here on the West Coast. And we do occasionally get shipments of things in from the other side of the country that are fresh. Saw palmetto berries, and things like that, which God bless the herb buyer. That's a nervous moment for them, especially with shipping challenges when you have fresh herbs coming and UPS says your package is delayed, and so we all get sweaty, for a minute there worrying about things, and it always works out. But that's something to take into consideration too. So we often look at historical use, we look at the constituent profile of what we're expecting to see in there, and kind of go from there and see what makes the best extracts. So I do see more intensity a lot of times when we use dried herb material and a changing color, things like that.
And we have a couple thank yous.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciating how informative and organized you are. And then Lilia says, thank you, Alexis. Wish all of you at Herb Pharm the best growing season. When does your season start out there?
It's now. The farm crew came back last Friday. So they are in the greenhouses, starting lots of seeds. We had some winter storms, so there's some cleanup to do. We've got some branches down, and things that we had to kind of do around that. They're doing some hula hoeing when it's not raining. We kind of had some rain, snow today. And so things are getting started. And as a person who works out here, thank goodness, I was awfully lonely. So I'm excited to see more folks out here. And again, I know that the plants know when we visit them, so I think that they're excited for the care that they get when everybody is around. So we're happy that they're back. And our first harvest is going to be dandelion. It pretty much is every year, which is also really exciting for us. So it's one of my favorite plants.
All right, and Deborah says, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Don't see any more questions. We're almost at 8:30. All right, well, Alexis, we really appreciate you speaking for the North Country Herbalist Guild tonight and sharing all of your experience and your information and your relationship to Herb Pharm and the plants. And thank you so much for being with us tonight.
It's my pleasure. If y'all ever have questions, please, feel free to share my email, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you just kind of about anything from a perspective of, a person on the inside. So I find it really interesting and engaging to share with others. So I'm super grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
All right. We appreciate it so much. And just to close out the meeting, thank you everyone for coming tonight and listening to our presentation with Alexis and our March monthly speaker. Just a reminder, again, if you want to donate for the meeting tonight or renew or become a member, you can go to nchg.org to do that. And join us for our book club on April 1st, and the practitioner discussion group will next be on April 22nd, 22. We got a couple more thank yous coming in. Great presentation. Love your enthusiasm from Barb. Tammy says, thank you, Alexis. So nice to hear the background and practices of such a great company. We just have a lot of thank yous rolling in. So
I'm so grateful. The feeling is very mutual.
all right. Well, have a good night, everybody. And yeah, enjoy it. We just had our first spring rain and storm tonight in the Midwest. So
That's great. It's happening.
we're enjoying the rainy night. It is. All right. Thank you, Alexis, and good night, everybody.
Thank you all.